Hello and welcome in the Women of Power podcast. I am Angie Murin, in charge of communication for CCR Group. At CCR Group, we are committed to professional equality between women and men. Every year, International Women's Day is an opportunity to meet women leaders in our sector. In these discussions, we invite you to discover their journey, their experience, and their point of view on gender equality at work. We hope it will inspire you, encourage you to connect, and allow you to find keys to create a fairer and more equal society. In this episode, we have the pleasure to meet Alexandra Spence. Hi, Alexandra. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Angie. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is shared. We will discuss how advancing in your career is about creating and forging relationships, how failure can be our greatest strength, and what could be done to help women returning to the office after maternity leave with serenity. Because as we are convinced at CCR Group that being able to confront our point of views is a way to grow, I invited collaborators to join the conversation in each episode of this podcast season. We will meet him at the end of the interview for the last question. So let's begin with the first question. Alexandra, you are Vice President of Distribution at Trisura Guarantee Insurance Company. What does your current role entail, and what set you off on this career path?
Thanks, Angie. So Trisura is a broker-first market, and when I say that, I mean we really view the broker as our primary customer. Without our brokers, we wouldn't have any business to underwrite. My role is all focused on brokers. And so thinking about, in general, how can we be more effective and efficient in terms of our dealing, our service, our products, both for our brokers and ultimately for our policyholders. And a big part of the role is about developing relationships and trust. So my role is a head office function. It's strategy work that I'd be setting and then relying on the underwriters to roll out and do. So it's about developing those strong internal and external relationships. In terms of what set me off on this career path, like many others that you hear that are in our industry, well, I was introduced by chance. A family friend was in the industry, and at the time I was looking for a role. My first boss in the industry, Jeanette Lawrence, she was at AIG at the time, took a chance on me and hired me as an underwriter. I didn't think that I would be still in the industry today, but the more time I spent understanding how the business worked, the different areas of the business that you could go into, the more I realized the opportunities are endless.
Well, you are lucky to work with a passion in this industry. And precisely, as a woman, what obstacles and stereotypes have you had to overcome to thrive in your business and in the world of work in general?
It's an interesting question. I have two younger sisters, and I never really grew up thinking that I couldn't do something because I was female. And so I guess when I came into the working world, you do look around, you look up, and it becomes a little bit clearer in terms of how many women are at the top, if you will. But from my perspective, I just think of it as it's really shifting the mindset that it's not, sometimes it was considered a perceived weakness. Instead, I see it as being a strength. I do feel like women have to work harder to get the same roles as sometimes that seems that their male counterparts may. So in terms of how I've overcome sort of being a female and often being one of few at meetings and different events, I think just showing up to the table and being yourself, being curious and asking questions. A few years ago, someone gave me a really good piece of advice that really changed the way I was approaching things at work. And that's the whole idea of Instead of asking for permission, beg for forgiveness. I found that to be quite empowering.
I'm very impressed how you become this powerful woman. And actually, what, in your view, can be done to promote women's access to management positions?
We need to be more intentional about building our network and our talent pipeline with females. I think often it can be easier to have a bunch of male colleagues, maybe because they're more outgoing, maybe because they seem to voice what they're looking for in terms of their next opportunity, etc. But I think that that's a big piece. I also a big advocate for encouraging women to share their ambition and their career goals. I think often we can be reluctant to share a big goal with people with a fear of, well, what happens if I don't achieve it? I've gotten more comfortable sharing that I do. My ambition is to continue to be, I guess, or to become a leader within the insurance space and a C-suite leader at the very least. And one other thing I had around that is financial acumen. I'm not suggesting that females are not as strong with their financial acumen, but I do think equipping young leaders, male or female to be honest, with the understanding of how the math works for the business will allow them to better understand what levers they can pull to make a bigger impact. And at the end of the day, how we're judged and measured is on our impact and value we're creating for our organizations. And often that needs to be tied to revenue.
Thank you for all these honest and precious piece of advice that you gave us. I was also thinking that maybe we could add the fact that enroll in an association can help to promote empowerment as well. Maybe you could briefly talk about this association that you maybe discovered a few months ago.
Oh, I'd love to. I'm so happy that you asked me about the Insurance Supper Club. So the Insurance Supper Club was started in the UK with the thinking behind how can we create the opportunities. It was originally for executive women to develop their informal network. It came over, Jodie Kaufman-Davis brought the Insurance Supper Club, ISC, to Canada. I believe maybe in 2018. It started off with a very small group of female CEOs in Canada and has since grown significantly. During the pandemic, like many others, I found it quite hard. I had 2 really young kids at home, and all of a sudden I felt my ambition was totally gone and was trying to figure out how could I continue the career path that I had wanted to continue to be on while being there to support my kids as they were just home with us every day. And the Insurance Supper Club was my outlet. The access that it gave me to like-minded females that were going through the same thing, that were willing to share and be vulnerable, was incredible. I now lead the Aspire program in Canada. I wanted to see how I could help create the opportunities that I had benefited so much from for other women in the industry.
Well, thank you. This is really inspiring. And it brings me to the 4th question. Advancing in your career is about creating and forging relationships. Can you share with us how mentors, role models, feedback providers, and coaches help you connect, gain support, develop, and excel in your career?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to have had access and worked for some exceptional role models and leaders. Really, I would cite the impact of 1 or 2 at the beginning of my career who really pushed for me to become more ambitious early on in my career. And they did this for me by creating continuous learning opportunities, ensuring I was given stretch assignments, encouraging me to think bigger, and giving me a seat at the table. I also think about it that we all drive our own career bus. So no one's going to all of a sudden take the wheel. So it's up to us to find ways. There's different ways to build your career. But I think being intentional about who has a role that you think you might be interested in longer term, reaching out to them, asking some questions. I always think people will be surprised how generous almost strangers are when you reach out and say that you're interested in learning more about their career path, what their role might look like, etc. And then one other comment that I resonated with me a few years ago that have been proactively figuring out who should be on it is the idea of developing your own board of directors. So the idea that you, within your network, you would have different people that you would rely on for different skills or for helping you maybe solve a different problem, or one person that you know has a different perspective or way of doing things than yourself. Surround yourself with those people and lean on them. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
I agree with you. Solidarity is very important in work, and I think it works even better in our personal life sometimes. Now, let me ask you a more personal question, if you will allow me, Alexandra.
Yeah, of course.
You have 2 kids who are 6 and 4 years old. Returning to the office after maternity leave can be overwhelming. How did you manage the return to work after becoming a mother? What initiative would you like to see to help support women as they step in and out to start and build their families?
I think there's got to be something around the idea, I call it a mat leave mentorship, but the idea of being paired up with someone that's within your organization that is not going on mat leave or paternity leave anytime soon, but that can be your connection point to the organization while you're out. And of course, some people might want to have no communication while they're out, and others might want to hear what's going on monthly. I don't think we can have a one-size-fits-all for this approach. That's the off-ramp that I'm speaking about, and then the on-ramp. So how do you then onboard someone that's been out for a few months, maternity, paternity leave? How do you onboard them, make sure that they come back to the organization and feel like a valued member, and then also are given the opportunity to be brought up to speed because they have been out for a while. And so I think of it, how do we should treat those returning as new employees in a way and have some sort of onboarding schedule prepared for them. So it's not them just trying to play catch up on the side.
For the last question, I will now welcome Pierre Dionne, who is Director and Chief Agent for CCR Re in Canada. Hello, Pierre. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Angie. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And you, how are you?
Very good.
Good, perfect. I would like to ask you both a question. We often say that every failure is an opportunity to grow. Can you share with us a time you failed and what you learned from it?
I think we've all had to deal with failures or lack of success in our careers. For me, in my current role, oftentimes it may be that I did not get signed on a particular treaty that I was trying to get on, or I failed to negotiate the terms I really wanted on a contract. These are not big failures. They're just part and parcel of our normal working life. But something that looms large for me was early in my career. As an actuary, I had to write 10 professional exams, and I'd been progressing very well, actually, until I failed my last exam. Just to put it in perspective, these exams were no small thing. Each exam would take a good 4 months of studying on evenings and weekends while I worked full time. Although I was able to write it again 12 months later, and I did pass that time. So the lesson I learned, I took with me throughout my career, and it is, first of all, respect your work-life balance. I'm not saying don't work hard. We all have busy period when we're asked to go an extra mile, but do try and keep a balance. It's important, and that comes back to your managers as well. And as the manager of the office here, I do try and always keep that in mind. Employees are entitled to their weekends and their evenings. We shouldn't expect people to be connected 24 hours, 7 days a week. And that's part of the problem today as well with the smartphones. And second lesson was don't wait for the last minute. Whether you're studying, whether you're working on a project or renewing your reinsurance treaty, don't wait for the last second. You may not have time to finish the work, or you may end up doing a lousy job rushing it through. Always come prepared. Easier said than done, of course, but the better prepared you are, the better the outcome. This is true in every aspect of our lives, whether you're in a negotiation or you're playing a game of golf. And I think lastly is always think positive. Walk in a situation envisioning success at the end of the road. It does sound silly, but I strongly believe that bringing a positive view does help in achieving your goals.
And what about you, Alexandra?
That was brave, Pierre, of you to share that you didn't pass one of your exams the first time. I find the question around failure an interesting one. And I worked with an executive coach in 2020, and she asked me a similar question. And after a week of thinking about it, I couldn't come up with a good example of a time where I really felt like I had failed at something, put myself out there. I mean, I'll admit, Pierre, I have a few exams that I haven't passed myself, but the first time. But anyways, during that work in 2020, it made me realize that I don't seek perfection, but I definitely want to feel confidence that I know how to do something, I know how to execute before I take something on. And I know that there's some stats that share that being often a female, or a trait shared by a lot of females, we won't apply to a job unless we check off all of the requirements, where often a lot of our male peers will check half, if not less than half, of the requirements and happily apply. So I'm trying to answer your question with not a great example, but instead what I ended up rethinking how I think of failure. And that's instead shifting it to more, if I don't do something, will I regret it? As an example, I've put forward a bunch of ideas in big meetings that haven't gained support. I've tried to roll out strategies that I thought were amazing and going to have a big bottom line impact that didn't. I've asked questions when maybe I shouldn't, but thinking back to the whole idea, I would have regretted not doing each of those. So I'd rather fail. I'm happy to fail versus the feeling of regret. So I just encourage those that are listening to think about that in a way of, it's okay if your idea doesn't get taken up or it's not chosen, but it is a failure to not put it forward, if that makes sense.
Totally agree. Well, thank you, Alexandra, and thank you, Pierre, for sharing your experience and thoughts on gender equality.
You're welcome.
I hope you had a good time talking about it. I hope this discussion was as useful as it was for me, full of ideas to take concrete actions. If it's not already the case, I encourage you to go listen all the episodes of the Women of Power podcast to discover the journey of exceptional women who each act in their own way to create a fairer and more equal society. If you had a good time listening to this episode, let us know. You can subscribe to the podcast, give it 5 stars, and leave a comment on listening platforms. Thank you again for listening.